Small actions can add up to large savings for you. Today on Headlines in Fine Print. Welcome to Headlines in Fine Print with Dion Williams, brought to you by Piedmont Advantage Credit Union. I'm Dion Williams, President and CEO of Piedmont Advantage Credit Union. On today's episode, we're going to talk about some ways to save money. Let's face it, the impact of inflation is being felt in so many aspects of life. From going to the grocery store to the gas pump, it's getting more expensive. So there's no magic bullet when it comes to saving money. However, remember, all the small items that we're going to talk about today, they can add up and make a big difference in your pocketbook. So let's begin with pay yourself first. If you've listened to any podcast or radio show that I've been on in the past, this is one of my favorite themes. Pay yourself first. And the reason why that's important is because if you say you're going to save what's left over, generally nothing is left over. And you're going to let the expenses control your paycheck if you're being driven by the expense side of the ledger instead of what you're saving for yourself. So we're going to touch on several aspects of that today. I'm going to begin this section with two. And first is if your employer offers a 401k plan in which there's a match, be sure you take advantage of that match because it's free money. And it doesn't matter how small the percentage is or the dollar amount is. Over one's working life, it really adds up. So whether you're in your 20s or in your 60s, take advantage of that free money. Be sure to pay yourself first through your paycheck because retirement savings, and we could do a whole show on that. Social Security, if you listen to the politicians and some of the financial experts, they talk about the viability of Social Security, whether the day needs to be extended when you start taking benefits, or whether the trust fund is sustainable. Regardless of all of that, retirement savings is something that is going to have multiple legs to the stool, so to speak. So it's really important to pay yourself first through that 401k, take advantage of any match from your employer, and start adding that leg to the stool, so to speak. Secondly, build the emergency fund. And depending on who you listen to in the financial realm, that emergency fund can have different aspects to it. Is it $1,000? Is it more? Is it less? And this is the bottom line on the emergency fund. Anything you have saved today is better than having nothing saved. So your emergency could be any number of things. In my household recently, we had a furnace with a problem in our house, and it's getting to the part of the year where it's getting hot. In North Carolina, we can have 4 seasons all in the same day. So with our furnace, we had to have a couple parts replaced. It was not inexpensive. So anything that you have that's saved there to put towards that, in terms of cash or in your checking account, that's money that you don't have to borrow, money you don't have to put on a credit card. So just be sure that you build that up. And again, it's something that can be $25 a paycheck. It doesn't have to be large chunks, but if you allocate that money up front and say, I'm going to put this money aside in the savings account for the rainy days, I promise you it will help. If it's $1,000 emergency and you have $500, you're halfway there. So it's important to have something there for the rainy days instead of nothing. So to wrap up this section or summarize it, again, take advantage of those employee matches for retirement plans, and be sure to set aside money for rainy days because Murphy's Law will strike. It could be something with your pet. It could be something with your air conditioning unit. It could be your car, any number of things. It could happen at any time, but set aside money for those unexpected expenses. And whatever that number is, whether it's more or less than $1,000, be sure it's a number that works for you. So now let's shift to the expense side of the ledger. And I want to begin here with subscriptions. And this is something, again, that kind of recently I recognized on a credit card statement. It was a statement that usually doesn't have anything on it. And I noticed there was a charge for a magazine subscription. And this was something that goes back 2 or 3 years. We did it as part of a fundraiser for a school. And the intent was to just do the subscription for 1 year, and that was it. But when I signed up for it, I gave them a card, and so they just kept renewing it and renewing it and renewing it. And so it's a little bit more than $40 a month, but that's something that stay on top of those subscriptions because a lot of them are set for auto renew. And if you're not on top of it and making sure that it doesn't renew if you don't want to, it'll continue to hit really forever. And the process for canceling is not always easy either. It's not as easy as going into a website and doing self-service. A lot of times you have to talk to a human on the other side of the phone who's going to try to talk you out of it, or you have to send an email, or you have to jump through some hoops. They make you work for it to cancel it. But just be sure that if you're not using the subscriptions, go through your statements for your checking account, for any credit cards that you have, and make sure that those charges are valid, and especially if it's in a recurring basis, that it is something that you did intend to pay for. Balanced payment plans. I want to talk about this one for a moment because, again, I talked about the Four Seasons of North Carolina. So in my house, the air conditioning is electric and the heat is natural gas. So in the summer months, the electric spikes, and in the winter months, the natural gas spikes. So how do we handle that? So balanced payment plans are offered by many of the electric companies and natural gas companies. So with these, instead of having the fluctuations that take place during the year, you'll have a level payment. So they'll divide what you spent the previous year by 12, and that's what you pay over the next 12 months. And that makes it a lot more predictable across the spectrum for both your gas and your electric. Now, there is a caveat to this I want you to be aware of. At the end of that 12 months, there will be an adjustment. So if your usage versus what you paid was more than, you'll have to pay an amount to make that up, and then they'll adjust your payment accordingly going forward. And then if you overpaid, they'll just adjust your payment down for the previous year. And this past year, my electric was, I underpaid, so I had to pay a small sum to catch that up, and the payment went up. But we had a warmer winter, so on that side of it, my payment went down without me having to pay anything extra. So just keep that in mind, that it's not a balanced payment forever. It's looked at every 12 months, and you might have some adjustments there, but it definitely beats the heck out of some of the peaks and valleys that come with the really cold months or the really warm months. Another way to manage expenses is through bundling products and services. Insurance is a common example of bundling. So think about your homeowners and your auto. You can get discounts by putting those together. And another way within your insurance policy to save money is on your premiums. So I'll give you some fine print on this, however. The lower the premium, the higher the deductible. So for example, on homeowner autos, you could take a $500 deductible, and the premium associated with that is actually going to be a lower premium, or a higher premium than if you have a $1,000 deductible, because you're taking more of that burden up front. So if you have a higher deductible, you're having a lower premium. But let me point you back to the start of our program when we talked about the emergency fund. If you do take that higher deductible path, be sure that you're setting aside money to cover that expense when it arises, so you're not finding yourself having to use a credit card or borrow money to meet that deductible, whatever it may be. But be sure to ask about what discounts are available. I have 2 student drivers and a third that's on that's got her permit, so she's soon to be a full licensed driver as well. But ask for discounts when you're looking at your auto insurance as well, such as for grades, good driving, defensive driving. Just go through the whole checklist. One thing that I noticed on my homeowner's policy, the most recent time when it renewed, was the policy did not reflect that I had a home security system tied into my smoke alarm, and that was also a discount there. So just be sure to go through those, and don't take for granted that nothing's ever changed, because things change all the time. And so explore every avenue possible for discounts, and bundling certainly a good starting point for getting some discounts on your insurance. Another piece of bundling is cable and internet services. And the fine print of this realm is the introductory period versus what happens after the introductory period. You can get a really good deal up front, but when it expires, what happens and what's your next plan? And one of the alternatives here is, quote unquote, cutting the cord on cable. So you can move to the streaming services, and full disclosure, that's something that my family did some time ago. But there's fine print with that as well. You have to be careful, because you're not replacing cable probably with just one streaming services. There's lots of streaming services out there, and they offer different things. So be sure you're adding up what you're spending in streaming each month, and make sure that you're not overlapping either, because sometimes there are some bundles that come with streaming services. You can get packages of streaming services together, or sometimes it's tied to your cell phone. So there's different things that's there. Make sure you're not overpaying, or you're not paying for 2 or 3 streaming services that basically get you the same array of channels. But you can save some money that way. But again, it just takes management that don't just keep tacking on $5 here, $10 there, because it can all add up quickly. And some of the streaming services are a lot more than $5 or $10 a month, as you know, if you participate in those. All right, next topic, let's talk about saving money at the gas pump. And that's one of the biggest pain points we have in recent times. So how do we keep those expenses in check when there doesn't seem to be any relief in sight, especially as we just passed Labor Day or Memorial Day weekend. So we're in that travel season that lasts till Labor Day weekend. So that's kind of the summer travel season when we see the prices go up because more people are traveling and there's more demand. So the first tip on this one is to explore the warehouse clubs. And they have some pretty good deals on gasoline. The fine print on this, I would just say, other than the long lines, because it's kind of, I think the secret's out on those, that the prices are good and it's kind of a long wait when you get there. But how much does that membership cost to the warehouse club? So if the membership, say $50 a year, how many times you have to go to the gas pump to make that up? And for my family of 5, I've noticed that we made it up pretty quick because we have 4 drivers in the family. But in addition to that, another thing I discovered at the warehouse club is the propane gas. So for the gas grill, if you just buy it outright, it's generally over $40 if you buy a new tank. If you trade out a tank, it's probably closer to $30. But I've noticed when you just have the tank filled up that you already own at the warehouse club, it's a pretty good savings. I mean, it's been closer to $20 to fill up the tank, so you can save some money that way. So there's a lot of different ways with that warehouse club membership that you can save the money to offset the cost of the membership, and the natural gas and then just getting gas at the pump are 2 ways that I've noticed where you can get some pretty good value out of that membership. Now, there's also apps and reward programs through other gas stations that provide discounts and cash back based on your volume of business with them. But as I noted earlier in the program, it's not one thing, it's the aggregate of things that helps you save money. So far in the program, we've talked about bundling, whether that's internet and cable, insurance policies. We've talked about saving money at the gas pump, and we've talked about paying yourself first so you have money for later in life through your 401k or retirement plan, and through your emergency fund, depending on how you have your household finances structured. If Murphy's Law strikes or life happens, however you want to call it, you've got some money set aside for that. And then the other one I mentioned in the opening was food. So let's talk about, food expenses have definitely escalated in recent years. And as we're transitioning from spring to summer, this is a perfect time to talk about growing a garden. So you can have your own produce and herbs rather than buying it from the grocery store. Gardening is also a fun hobby to get you outside, and you get the benefits of enjoying what you grow, whether it's the fruits, the vegetables, the herbs, kind of a fun thing. And when my kids were younger, that's something they really enjoyed doing with us. So keep that in mind as a way to save money. And also a number of years ago, we had chickens too for the eggs. And that's one of those that's a lot of work. But it was a cool experience to do that. But there's some things you can do to lower the cost at the grocery store for sure. Now, also on food, from my college days through the present, eating out remains a temptation. And in my work as a financial planner in the past, that was one of the areas that if you're working with somebody on where can you cut expenses, that is one of the biggest areas where you see folks, they spend more than they think. And it's just so easy that when you're out traveling for activities, for work, you're too tired to cook. I mean, it's just so easy. And now with today's DoorDashes and Uber Eats and those services, they'll just bring it right to you. The delivery range has definitely expanded too. But eating at home is much more cost effective than eating out. And this is an exercise that my family has gone through as far as, so we bought this food at the grocery store and we cooked it. How much is what we bought cost versus if we did the same thing out in a restaurant? And usually eating out wins every time. When I was growing up, we would eat out one night a week. It was usually on the Saturday evening or Sunday after church, but that was the only time we ate out during the week. And that was a really good way to budget and control the money that was spent on dining out. But also, to conclude the discussion on food, I'll leave you with two things. I know everybody that's watching this knows or listening to this. Clip coupons, because there's a lot of ways to find coupons to save money, and a lot of the stores have their rewards cards and so forth that you enter your phone number, and they have discounts if you're a member of the club, so to speak. And don't shop when hungry. And that's I know that one well too. That just at lunch, if I'm going out at lunch at work, that if I'm hungry and just been working all day and hadn't had a chance to really have a snack or take a break or anything, you just spend more because you're hungry, and that seems like the easier thing to do. So hopefully there's some tips that help you out if you're at the grocery store or thinking about the food part of your budget. Okay, checkout terminals. And this is something that's a newer one. Automation reaps many benefits. It's great to tap your card and pay and not have to carry around checks or cash even. The shift away from cash has made life more convenient in a lot of respects. But there's one thing about the checkout line in today's world that represents a fine print moment in my mind. How many times have you checked out and been prompted to add $1 or more or round up your payment, and that amount's going to go to charity? Or when you go to the restaurant, used to the tip was presented differently than it is now. Now it's kind of like it gives you three options, and 15% used to be the standard in tips, and today it seems like it even starts at 20. And don't misinterpret what I'm saying, because I have two kids that work in food service industry now, and I know it's very important to support folks in that line of work. But in today's economy, every dollar counts, and if you're not looking with a purpose when you check out and you're prompted for that charitable contribution, or the default tip is a very large tip, just make sure you're reading before clicking to make sure you know what you're doing, because I bet if you saved all your receipts over a month and you counted all those times you were prompted for the charitable contribution or prompted for the higher tip amount, it would be a substantial amount of money at the end of the month. And again, I'm not saying don't contribute to charity and don't tip. I think both of those are very worthy causes. But used to, those were things that we talked about a lot around the holidays, especially on charitable contributions, about be careful of scams during that time when we're thinking more about that. It's every single time you go to the grocery store, the retail store, anywhere you go, you are prompted. And sometimes I've noticed being prompted for tips in settings where you wouldn't even think a tip would be appropriate. Like, it's like, well, wait a minute, I wasn't at a table and somebody wasn't serving me, and it's just, so there's a lot of things there to think about, and just make sure that you're mindful of where your dollars are going and don't just take it for granted. Let's revisit the concept of your paycheck. We began with the concept of paying yourself first and directed that discussion towards saving for retirement and building your emergency fund. But there's some other avenues to consider to get more out of your paycheck. The first is your income tax withholdings. Now, I know it seems like the greatest thing in the world in the spring when you file your taxes and you say, gosh, I'm getting this refund. Yes, it is good to have that forced savings component, but you gave the government an interest-free loan over the past year. So let's use a round number. Let's say you got a refund of $2,400. Divide that by 12, $200 per month. That's $200 per month that you could have used to pay off debt, set aside for your emergency fund, set aside in your 401k or your employer's retirement plan. So there's a lot of things that you could do with that money. And I know it's kind of that forced savings component is good if you don't have the discipline and the habits built with saving money. But in a perfect world, your income tax liability would be zero at the end of the year, meaning you got out just what you needed, you paid just what you needed. So that's something to think about in terms of your tax withholdings if you find you're going paycheck to paycheck, and it would be helpful to have some of that money helping you out during the year. Secondly, flexible spending account. And this is basically where you're setting aside money pre-tax for medical expenses during the year. With my family of 5 and their ages, it's orthodontist, it's dentist, it's glasses. It's a lot of different things that we usually have no trouble spending what you're allowed to set aside for this during the course of the year. Now, it is use it or lose it, so make sure you have a plan if you set that money aside. But that is really a great way to put money back for different medical expenses. And again, it could be something that's unforeseen. It could be your deductible. Even with co-pays and the way some insurance plans are set up today, if you have a broken arm or something unforeseen like that, you're still going to get hit with a higher deductible in your out-of-pocket expense. So having that account to fall back on can really be a blessing and possibly lower your tax bill a little bit for expenses that you're going to incur anyway. So let's take a moment to summarize today's topic of saving money. There's not one singular action a person can take to save a lot of money. Rather, it's the accumulation of multiple actions. And we could do a lot of shows on this topic. I feel like we scratched the surface on some good content today, but there's certainly other avenues that we could explore together. And today we discussed your paycheck itself as an opportunity for you to direct money first as opposed to the expenses guiding your money. Then we talked about a number of topics where you can make inroads on reducing expenses. We talked about gas and groceries, for example. We spent time on the fine print of subscriptions and bundling services. We hope today's content provided some food for thought and some action steps to help you put more money in your wallet. Thank you so much today for joining us for Headlines in Fine Print with Dion Williams, brought to you by Piedmont Advantage Credit Union. We'll launch a new episode each month and discuss topics that are relevant to your financial life. We have a wealth of resources on staff that can provide information on a variety of financial topics and help you achieve your financial goals. If you'd like to learn more about the credit union or how to become a member, you can find us online at pacu.com. That's PACU.com. Thank you again for listening, and we hope you have a great day.